Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbon TV or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by onX Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is onX Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, onX Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust onX Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about onX, go to onxmaps.com/hunt and check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. All right, guys, if you're in the market for a new hunting rifle this coming year, look no further than a Kelbley's rifle. I've been rocking their Coda rifle for the last couple seasons, and I've had great success with it. It's an amazing shooter, and every time I put one of their rifles in somebody's hands, they're like, oh, I got to get one of these. Kelbley's holds over 92 world and national records that are either broken or set on one of their actions or rifles. So they really set a higher level of accuracy. If you want to know more about Kelbley's rifles, go to kelbley.com. That's KELBLY.com. Tell them Johnny Mack sent you with Soul Seekers, and go enjoy shooting that much more in this coming hunting season. Be blessed, everybody. Go check out Kelbley Rifles. All right, guys, if you have never upgraded your trigger on your hunting or shooting rifle, it is time that you do. And when you do, I want you to take a look at Timney triggers. Built by hand in the USA since 1946, and every expert recognizes the importance of their trigger. Timney makes the world's finest trigger, and you gotta love it because they are built in the USA. For those of you who are lever action fans, Timney just released their first lever action trigger. You're going to want to go check that out. We talk about that on episode 290 of the podcast. But if you are looking for triggers for whether it's a handgun, rifle, or anything else, go check out timneytriggers.com and go become a better, more accurate, more deadly shooter because it starts at your fingertips. Be blessed. Enjoy the episode. All right, guys, this episode today I'm super excited to bring you. It is one that was a lot of fun to be a part of, and that was recorded live from the road, driving up to deer camp in Nebraska to meet up with Hornady Ammunition. It was a wonderful hunt, and if you followed along with our stories on social media, you already know how it went down because I gave a play-by-play daily, and that was a lot of fun to bring you. But this episode is packed with tips, tactics, cool stories, perspectives, and a whole lot more. Hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack. Today I am joined by my fellow partner in crime and in the passenger seat of our vehicle on our way of trails to Whitetails. That's right, we are recording live from the vehicle on our way to deer camp up in Nebraska for a little hunt with Hornady Ammunition. Going to be chasing whitetails for a couple days, and you know, with as much fun as road trips are, a lot of it always comes down to who you're in the car with and what you get to talk about and all that. And we're like, let's mic this up. Let's see what we can record and what do you want to talk about. So without further ado, my man, Flatland Sam, what's up, brother?
What's going on? Yeah, just cruising down I-30, what is it?
I-35.
I-135.
135
just
heading
making
north.
miles. It ain't bad. Pretty good drive.
Yeah, it has been. I've never been to Kansas. First time passing through. Went through Oklahoma, Kansas, and then into Nebraska, which is interesting. I was telling you this earlier. I felt like we drove through Oklahoma so quickly. And before we know it, we're going to be through Kansas. And I was like, man, road tripping
being originally from the PNW, you drive east, and when you drive east, you're always driving the length of states rather than the short side of them. And even if you head south and you head into California, California is a long state when you head to it from the north. So,
Yeah, it's always interesting leaving Texas because Texas is such a big state. So I mean, you can drive 4 or 5 hours and not even, especially if you're going north up through Amarillo or something like that. You can make a lot of miles in Texas and spend a lot of time driving just through Texas.
right, and not even be out of Texas.
Yep.
What's interesting also is I'm a proponent of seeing America. I want to see what all these states are about. And the fact that I'm newer to whitetail hunting and now coming and seeing what Oklahoma looks like, seeing what Kansas looks like, going to see what Nebraska looks like, I can 100% relate now and understand why people are such whitetail fanatics.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do out here in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. And I mean, how many deer did we see, yet so far on this drive?
Oh my gosh.
A pile of them.
I'd have to take my shoes off and count on my toes.
Yeah, don't leave your shoes on, please. No, I mean, driving up through, watching the sunrise, we got to see a lot of animals, a lot of wildlife. No booners.
Booners.
Didn't see any booners, but man, the number of deer we saw was pretty substantial. And yeah, I mean, we actually took the city way, driving up through Oklahoma City and whatnot. And if we'd have backroaded it, who knows what we would have seen, but pretty countryside.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, it was really interesting. I've shot 3 deer this year so far in the state of Texas, and the amount of meat that I got off of those 3 deer is not what you'd call substantial by any means. And
it's they're smaller, I mean, Texas deer are smaller. They don't have the browse, the variety of vegetation that these Midwestern deer, get to put their mouths on. But it's different for sure.
It was pretty interesting, though, getting to Oklahoma and being like, whoa. And really, when we crossed into Kansas, I saw like a substantially larger bodied deer.
Yeah. They
noticeable. Like,
100%.
Like, whoa, that's a big deer.
Yeah, these animals up here, they got to endure that winter that's a little different than what we get in Texas. And, fighting the wind, fighting the cold, and again, they get a better browse, so it's a different animal.
Yeah. So you just got done shooting your very first PRS match.
I did.
This last week.
I did, yeah. It was an experience.
What made you want to get into PRS?
That's a good question. I've always been interested in shooting long distance, and I geek out on the science behind it, and not knowing what I don't know, I kind of gravitated towards the people who are professionals at it, more or less,
Right.
And, I've hunted my whole life and probably didn't start shooting, beyond 500 yards until maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Really, what got me into it was when the 6.5 PRC came out. And, Hornady came out with those ELD M's and X's, and that's when I really, was like, okay, reading what they're saying online, putting it all together, I'm like, all right, I got to get one of these. So I picked one up, and, within about 3 months of owning it, had me a load worked up and was shooting it at 1,000 yards.
Shooting steel at a distance is so much fun.
Yeah.
And you and I just got done recording a podcast, which has already launched, episode 294. It all starts with a daisy. And I forgot, specifically, I don't know why I skipped on this, but maybe it was because I wanted to get into hunting so bad that I wanted to get good with my firearms, but I forgot the root of it all, which is BB guns, pellet guns.
Yeah.
And when Lawrence Taylor from Daisy was like, yeah, man, hang a pop can from a tree and cut it in half and see who can cut it in half first. And
yeah.
And I did that right after the podcast, and I was getting that audible response to my
Yeah.
shooting.
Yep.
And I don't really know what it is. It's hard to put words on it, but hearing
Yeah.
the response of your shot is so much more impactful and addicting than just shooting paper.
Well, I can tell you what it is. You get that little dopamine hit.
Oh yeah?
You get that little audible feedback, and you're like, "Ooh, I like that. I want a little more of that."
Uh-huh.
Oh, 100%.
Hits
Yeah.
the senses.
Yeah, it definitely does. It hits you right in the guts, and it feels good, But yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it. Just learning how to shoot at distance, learning how to run a ballistic solver, and I knew some of the right people that were in the game, and so I just reached out to them eventually. And really, what sparked it is getting to the PRS is. There was a new, I was on the PRS website just kind of browsing one day, and I get to looking and I see a match in Lipan, Texas, which most people don't know where that is, but it's about 30, 40 minutes away from us. So I get to digging into it. Well, there's a brand new range that had just opened in September that was hosting matches. And so I immediately was like, well, goodness, I got to go check this out.
Yeah.
So, one afternoon, me and my wife, we drove out there and met the owner and his wife and hit it off with them real quick. And push come to shove, I became a member immediately. I couldn't pass it up. And they held just monthly matches out there. And so I took it as a sign, and I was like, man, this is it. It's my time to get into this. And, so that's kind of how I jumped off into it.
So how much of your hunting shooting comes into play when shooting a PRS match? That's something I've never done, but I'm really fascinated by it.
That's another reason why I was interested into it, because every shot that you take, I'm not going to say every, but the majority of the shots you take are improvised shooting, if that makes any sense. So
in PRS.
Yes, and in hunting, typically, you can have the same situation to an extent.
Yeah.
I've shot deer off a fence post. I've shot deer off of the front of a four-wheeler. I've shot the deer off of a hood of a truck. And those are all positions that you'll see in a PRS match. So my brain immediately went to, I can hone my craft on learning how to shoot better and faster and in improvised positions. Man, this is right up my alley.
Yeah, ultimately, we want to always be the best and most efficient and effective as possible, regardless of what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I never start a hobby or passion or a pastime and be like, man, I can't wait to take last place, or I can't wait to be okay at this.
Right.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it is. It was a really eye-opening experience. It's easy. I can, just about anybody, I can put them on my gun, lay them down prone, throw a bag under the rear, and tell them to shoot a target, and they're going to hit it, But shooting off these props and learning how to articulate your rifle and your bag and your system and your dope and your data and running a Kestrel and all this stuff, like, it's a whole new world, for me at least,
Yeah. Well, so one thing I just want to acknowledge is this was Sam's idea to record a podcast on the way up to deer camp, and this is because you like to listen to a podcast in the PRS world.
Yeah.
Called
Miles to Matches.
Miles to Matches.
Yeah.
And where they record podcasts in the car on their way to their...
Francis Cologne and Chad Heckler, they drop some really good information and talk a lot of good stuff. And some of the people that I've met through the in the PRS world know them personally and have really good things to say about them. So that's kind of what spiked my interest in it, and listening to that podcast where they're recording on the road. So I was like, hey, we need to do this.
I like that. Well, all you listeners, we left at 4:30 in the morning from our hometown, and we were driving up in Kansas, and I knew my brother. He lives about an hour away from me in Texas. I called him up. I was like, hey, aren't you in Kansas? He was like, yeah. And I was like, let's meet up. And so we just got done eating some Kansas barbecue.
Yeah,
It wasn't the best,
it was
unfortunately.
it was subpar.
I mean, I can say that because I live in Texas now.
That's right.
Like, I know what real barbecue is.
Yeah, that's right. Tell the listeners.
If you ever order brisket and it comes out chopped up,
Yeah.
that means it wasn't good enough to be served sliced.
Yeah, you better find the sauce.
Yeah, very quickly, and it came chopped up. But we're not trying to hate on restaurants; they're doing their thing. But ultimately, what I wanted to highlight is the fact that we got to meet up with my brother, who is marketing strategist for Kubota tractors, and he was up here in Kansas delivering some talks about branding and missions and all that. And over lunch, we were talking about how my brother shared how everyone likes to talk about, the who, what, where, how. But ultimately, what sets every brand apart is their why.
Yeah.
And he used the example, when it comes to cars, and he said a word. He goes, "Tell me what car brand you associate this word to," and he said safety. And Sam, you said
Toyota.
I said Volvo, and he goes, "Yeah, see, Toyota's up there. Some people would say Subaru, but Volvo is actually the one who holds the space when it comes to the safest vehicles." And he's talking about brands and how people, to make a brand stick and last and be important, is associating it with the why.
Yeah.
So who, what, where, how, why, and the why takes courage to articulate. Ultimately, if you guys follow Soul Seekers, you understand that if you heard the word mentorship, you would associate that with Soul Seekers.
Right.
If you heard conservation, you would associate that with Soul Seekers. Community, Soul Seekers.
Yep.
Primal adventure, Soul Seekers. And that's just 4 of our 6 brand pillars right there. But the idea is that we have to be able to articulate our why. And in a world where we need to make sure that we are defending hunting and encouraging others to join and participate so that they can have a perspective, not just an opinion. And when it comes to the defense thereof through voting rights and all that, that we actually make sure hunting lasts for generations to come. What was your big takeaways on when he shared that? Did you have any aha moments or deep thoughts?
In what regard? Just talking about the why?
Yeah, the why, the branding, idea of
the why is everything, right? I mean, why do you wake up at a certain time? Why do you it can go in any direction. It means everything, I can tie this right back to that first match. I was asking why on everything.
Yeah.
Why do you do this? Why that? Why do you go with this brand? Why do you like this bag? It has to do with, it's why everybody makes the same choice with whatever they choose,
Right.
And you've got to be able to represent why you believe something.
Yeah.
That's kind of my takeaway on it.
So why I bring up that word and branding and all that is us as hunters. It takes courage to be able to articulate our why. Why is hunting a right? What I believe and truly hold to be is an inherent right. The ability to self-procure food for ourselves. That's a right.
Well, it used to be a necessity. You didn't have a choice.
Right.
But nowadays, in modern world, you can go to the grocery store and get whatever you want most of the time. COVID was a different deal, and people got their eyes opened up, and I think that was a big influx of hunters and people interested in homesteading and stuff and whatnot like that. But it used to be a necessity. It's what you had to do,
Yeah.
you know? So that's kind of where my brain left turned when you said that.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's also interesting. Here we are driving through the state of Kansas right now, which is considered a flyover state, more or less. And you look around, it's like there's not a whole lot here. But what there is habitat for wildlife. And you can see why these rural counties, rural towns are so proponent and so big time when it comes to outdoor education, hunting, fishing, trapping, and how when you go to the metropolitan areas of the big cities, the concrete jungles, that you forget about it because it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, kind of like me to an extent. You know, a lot of these folks that grow up out here in these small towns in Kansas and Oklahoma and whatnot, it's generational. It's what you do. You know, there's not a whole lot of stuff to do, and you know, their dads did it and their dads did it and on up the line, and it's been handed down, and it's important to them. You know,
Right.
it being all they know. And not knowing the city and what the city life is all about, and so they don't know any different, you know.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So we'll dive into that more later on some other episodes, but I want to tie this back into Sam, you doing PRS, because what made me think about that is you're starting something brand new, something you've never done. Yes, you've shot a gun before, but you've never competed in that type of scenario and style.
Yep.
It reminded me a lot about that podcast episode that we did, oh man, last summer. It was like, when was the last time you did something for the first time?
Yeah.
Because that's what you're going through in this protocol. And when it comes to learning hunting and learning how to hunt, it's too easy for veteran hunters. And I find myself constantly, the more years that I get into hunting, the more I look at it and be like, oh, it's easy to forget the feelings of the frustration and the barriers of entry and the hurdles that new hunters have to face.
Right. Yeah. I know where you're going with that. I mean, you're 100% right. People that don't grow up doing it, come from the city or whatever, you know, their situation might be. Yeah. I mean, it's an undertaking. I mean, I know people have heard stories of a guy jumping off the deep end, going into hunting, and just mounting a scope. I mean, not even, you know, have their elevation turned on the side.
Yep.
And not knowing, you know,
Yep.
or making an X with their crosshairs instead of a cross, you know, or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It things like that you don't think about, but it definitely
Right.
it happens all the time.
When it came to you asking questions at this PRS competition, did you find a lot of these shooters welcoming, offstanding, like they viewed you as competition? Were they willing to share, and or were you like, oh man, I haven't thought about that in a while, let me think about that, and they couldn't answer a question right away?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there was a guy that from my local hometown that had shot a bunch of PRS 2 days and did the whole travel circuit and did really well, you know, probably 4 or 5 years ago, and he kind of got out of it. But same like me with the new range opening, he dove right back into it. So I reached out to John Wells and you know, struck up conversation with him and asked him if he'd come work with me a little beforehand, before the match, and we got together and we squatted up, and then he reconnected with another old friend that he had shot with in the past, and so we all squatted up together. So, you know, talking about mentorship, it was him. You know, he helped me, and then Jake Graves, the owner of the range. I mean, one evening I just got my Kestrel in. I had a Friday off from work, and I just got my Kestrel, and I didn't know nothing about it. Read a little on the internet and whatnot, so I, you know, had me 100 rounds loaded up. I headed out to the range, and with no expectations other than me to figure it out on my own. And push come to shove, Jake was out there, and he didn't have a whole lot going on, and he had shot a bunch of matches and done really well, competing up, northern United States and whatnot. And he said, "Yeah, I'll come shoot with you." So he met me out there and mentored me, and so yes, the community is more than welcoming to new shooters. It was a great experience.
Did the shooting community, were they excited that a new person was there?
Yes.
Because one of the things that I view hunting, that hunting is such extremes, all categories.
Yeah.
You got the people that want everyone to experience hunting, such as myself, and then you have people that view hunting as, no, I want it to be an isolating thing. I want to be by myself. I want to maybe escape. I want this to be me time. Some people view more hunters as pressure, extra hunting pressure, and now competition.
Yeah.
You know, Joe Rogan talked about this with Cam Haines on his podcast, where they roll up to a trailhead and they see this trailhead that used to not be packed, and now all of a sudden it's packed with trucks and cars, and
Yeah.
they're, and then there's a side that says social media is ruining hunting because you're promoting it in a way that people normally wouldn't be exposed to, and then you are a part of the problem and complaining about it rather, So when it comes to the shooting world, was there feedback like that, or what was the experience?
Man, it was a really good experience. I got no pushback. Everybody was very, very friendly. Almost to the point to where you're like, man, these are really cool guys that just kind of came out of the woods, out of the woodwork. It was a great experience. Everybody was very helpful. This was just a monthly match, just a one day, so we were helping each other. The guys that wanted critique got critique, and it was a great experience. It was, and what was cool is John, he hadn't shot in a while, and Kevin, that was also in our squad, that very experienced as well, and he hadn't shot in a long time. He had to put a rifle together real quick for the match, and he even shot some ammo that he had loaded in 2019. It just had shelved,
Oh wow.
So I didn't feel quite like the new guy, even though I was. We all helped and fed off of each other, and it was a very, very pleasant experience. And one thing that Jake, the owner of the range, he said, man, I've got all the gear, all the guns, all the stuff. If you want to try something, let me know. They're working on getting some loaners and stuff out there. So even if, whatever you have, show up and shoot it. And it's, somebody will get you on target.
Yeah. So if someone wants to start shooting PRS or any other, let's just use PRS for an example. What is the bare minimum that they need to get started?
Yeah, that's you can go down 100 rabbit holes with that question, but most of the time, if you've got a rifle that's magazine fed with a scope that you can dial, and you have dope on that you do something with, you can show up to a match. You can borrow tripods. You can borrow bags. People are very, very willing to share with you, and it's interesting because I don't have what they quote unquote call a gamer gun. I don't have a gamer gun.
A gun built for the PRS.
Correct. They call them gamer guns. Some people call them gamer guns. I don't have one, and so I show up with my 308 that I put it in an MDT chassis, and it's a short barrel gun. It's an 18-inch barrel, and definitely not the correct tool for the job. But I was able to, I got hits on targets, and I cleaned a stage, and I also got a 0 on a stage, but the equipment is just like hunting. I mean, you can get as wild, as crazy as you want, but to be competitive, there is a certain rifle build and design that lends to higher hit probability.
Yeah. I'm going to interject here for a second because you're on the topic of it. And I want to give a shout out to one of our advertisers, one of our sponsors, Kelbley's Rifle. They make phenomenal actions.
Yeah.
And that is a great, if you're wanting to get into this and you're like, okay, I can go buy a factory rifle that's mag fed, which, by the way, I want you to explain why you want a mag fed gun.
Yeah.
But if you want to build your own gun, Kelbley.com. And they have complete rifles as well, but shout out to them.
I saw, I guess I saw 3 Canuck. Is that how you say it?
Nanook.
Canuck. Yeah.
Nanook action.
I saw three guys shooting Nanook actions out there.
Sweet.
Running and gunning, and
that's what we're going to be shooting on this hunt.
I know it. Yeah, great action. It's talking with these guys with these, really elaborate gun builds, and that's one thing that they always say don't cheap out on is, an action, you buy a quality action and you'll keep that action for life. Barrels are consumables in this sport. You'll consume a barrel, but that action stays.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
actions don't wear out.
Actions don't wear out. You might have to change the bolt head on it or something, but quality action, yeah, that's a life thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they that's one thing that they always said. And I actually had your tripod out there that had a Kelbley sticker on it, and they were like, "Hey, what about that?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, let me tell you. Let me tell you what I know about that."
Marketing is why putting stickers on things is important.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, I had several people that people I didn't even know come up and be like, "Hey, you got a Kelbley's?" And I'm like, let me tell you about these Kelbley's. Pretty fun, But yeah, so mag-fed. So in a typical PRS match, you'll have 8 to 12 stages, depending on the match, where you're at, wherever. And typically a stage is 10 to 12 rounds, so 10 to 12 shots per stage. So most guys run like ACIS or MDT mag with an extension on it, 12 rounder, whatever, deal like that. So like if you're using a rifle with a bottom metal that holds 4, that you're not really, not saying you can't do it, because I'm sure people have. I mean, heck, if I didn't have anything with a mag, I wouldn't hesitate to do it just for the exposure and the experience. But
yeah.
To be able to get all your shots off, you need to have a mag-fed rifle and
what's the minimum number of shots on a stage?
10 to 12. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah. I think we had one stage that had 8 shots maybe or something, but 10 to 12 is pretty typical for a PRS match from what I've been exposed to.
Yeah.
And it's it's a competition, so you're working under time. You normally it's 90 seconds. Some stages were 2 minutes.
To get all shots off.
Yep.
And then hopefully you hit your target as well.
That's the idea. That's correct. Yeah. Normally you'll have troop lines and different kind of stuff. I mean, one stage was 10 shots, 10 positions, one standard yardage, and then you've got 5 positions, 2 shots per position with 5 different yardages.
Huh. Do you know the yardages beforehand, or do you have to range in the middle of it all?
No. So when you start a match, normally you'll get a match book the morning of, and it'll have the stages broke down with the procedure and the distances and whatnot. So it's predetermined. So, you guys with your kestrels, I'm sure everybody knows, but you can make a target card. So you can input all that data, so you can show up to the stage and collect select your sector, and already have all your dope loaded in, capture your wind, direction of fire, and you're off to the races.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so you got a gun, prefer mag fed. Optics, does it matter?
It does.
Okay, so what's like the minimum magnification scope that you'd want for PRS?
Yeah.
Is a 3 to 15 gonna cut it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it really depends. See, like me shooting a 308, a heavier recoiling gun, you don't want a ton of magnification. On most of my rifles, I typically like to have a 5 to 25 or a 3 to 18 or something in that range. On this particular gun, I've got a 3 or a 4 to 18, and I found myself running it on about 12 power for most stages. When on the long range stage, when we went out to 1,000 and beyond, I bumped it up a little bit. We were shooting prone, so my stability was there, and I could watch my impact and whatnot. But a lot of the guys, they run a higher magnification optic just to be able to spot the trace, spot the impact, spot the miss, and be able to make a correction.
Does it have to be first focal plane or second focal plane or?
I would say that I would recommend it to be first focal plane just for accuracy and measurement. Second focal plane, definitely usable, but typically those have a fixed power to where your reticle, your measuring device within your scope.
Right, like if you zero your gun, let's say I have a 3 to 15 VX5 loophole.
Yeah.
That's second focal plane, and I zero my gun at 15 power, max power.
Right.
Then if I back my power down to like 4 or 5, my zero will shift a little bit, correct?
Not necessarily. So what it is like on a second focal plane optic, say at 13 power, your reticle is true to the measurement within the reticle. So if you got a mil scope.
Oh, so if it's not just a duplex, but it has the hash marks.
Yeah. So like your mil scopes will be mostly modern scopes. Well, if it's a mil scope, it'll have a mil reticle in it. If it's an MOA scope, it have MOA reticle. But with a second focal plane, typically they have a fixed power to where the reticle is true to measurement.
Yeah.
And when you come off of that, it is not true. First focal plane, from lowest power to highest power, a mil's a mil, a MOA is an MOA, and a good quality scope is going to be true to what it calls it out to be.
Nice. Look at this, man. We're getting off the interstate. We're no longer heading north in Kansas. Now we're going to head west to make our way up into Nebraska.
I know. I'm excited.
Oh, phenomenal. Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah. So typically, you want a first focal plane. It'll help you. And one thing I've learned is we had a guy in our squad that was shooting. He had I believe it was like a Leica optic on his rifle, and it was an MOA. Well, everybody else in the squad's talking mils. And
he couldn't do the math in his head.
Right, and the verbiage was off, and we were all speaking one language. He was speaking another language. So, if somebody was going to dive off into that sport, so it be
PRS deals in metric.
Yeah,
not imperial.
Yeah, and after I got my first mil scope, I was like, okay, I get this. 10s are easy.
Yeah.
10s are easy. So I think I'm going to take it and run with it and just be mils from here on out.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. Okay, so scope, rifle. Do you need a bipod? What do you shooting off of?
Yeah, so you can get as crazy with it as you want to, just like anything else. But a lot of the guys from Oklahoma, they just like them, standard old, whatever, Caldwell or whatever,
your basic.
Yeah, just a basic.
Like a 6x9?
Yeah, just pretty basic bipod. I actually have an Atlas that I've had for a lot of years. Anything like that would be fine. MDT's got their new SkyPod. I'd love to have one, but pretty big expense,
right.
for a bipod. But that's kind of the gold standard, But yeah, it doesn't. Any old bipod would really work. What I've found is your bag is where you need to spend your money. Having a good quality bag, whether it be a Weebad or a Armageddon gear or a Coltac, that's where I really saw the benefit, was when I got to throw down a really good bag, and I was like, oh, okay, I get this.
Really?
Yeah.
It just sucks your gun in.
Yeah, it just squeezes it and holds it in, and it's rock solid. And it was an eye opener. That was one of those things where I was like, okay, I get this now. It really made sense to me. Just like when John let me shoot his 6-dasher, that weighs 21 pounds, and I've been shooting a 308 that weighs 14 pounds. I was like, holy cow, okay, I get it now, So yeah, a shooting bag, it's worth its weight in gold.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I actually brought it with me. Jake Graves, the owner of the range, he let me borrow one for the match, and I brought it along with us on this hunt, and we'll throw her down in the blind, and
oh, good.
You'll get a little taste of it.
Heck yeah, dude! I just ran over a skunk. I mean, it was dead already in the road, but you smell that?
Yeah.
I full on smashed it with my tires. Hopefully that scent doesn't stick around. Life on the road, baby. Trails to whitetails.
You bet. Look at this terrain we're in now.
Yeah, so all you listeners, we have officially moved out of like the flatland, and we're getting into a little bit of terrain and topography shift where there's starting to be some draws and knolls, and I mean,
it looks like Wyoming minus the mountains.
Yeah, on the horizon.
Yep.
Like on the distance where you'd see the mountains. And
yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty right here.
Yeah, look at that field right there. Isn't it crazy how green that wheat field is?
You think that's what that is? Winter wheat?
Yeah.
Golly. I mean, I could just imagine that at sunrise, the animals that you'd see out in that field.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's, something I always, when I see a field like that, like I think back, like, not to take it in another direction, but like, I can remember
another direction.
Well, I just remember watching the sunrise on a field like that when I was a kid, and it's always been special, getting to see it and whatnot. But everybody has their own image of what heaven is, what it's going to look like. They say it's painted with the streets of gold, but my heaven is getting to see that. That's what I think it's going to look like. Beautiful
sunrises.
Yeah, man, sunrise over
over an ag field.
Yeah, over a wheat field like that. It's special.
I'll tell you, I was running my neighborhood the other night, and one of the things that I think Texans, correct me if I'm wrong, I think take for granted is the sunsets.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? You don't think?
No, I think it's appreciated.
I was running, and the colors in the sky.
Yeah.
Was absolutely spectacular, to the point where it made me just want to stop and pray and thank God for it's the fact that I'm getting to see this.
It's real. You can probably say that folks not from Texas might take it for granted, but we do. We got some beautiful sunrises and sunsets, and it's funny. My son, he likes to ask me. He, being a little kid, he's like, "Dad, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite color?"
Oh yeah. And
I'm like, "Man, son, it's my favorite color is that amber color in the morning when that sun breaks. Getting to see that. That's my favorite color."
Nice. My favorite color is gray.
Yeah.
It's not even a color; it's a shade.
What's funny? My mom always my same thing. My son, he's always asking. My son, he calls my mother Honey, and my dad, he calls him Chief. So he always goes, hey, Honey, what's Chief's favorite color? What's Chief's favorite color?
That's cute.
My mom goes, beige.
Beige?
Beige. So now you can ask Bo, hey, what's Chief's favorite color? And he'll say beige.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny.
That is awesome in so many ways. Yeah, now that I'm going to talk whitetail here for a second also is I look at these fields and I'm like, okay, these are great fields, but why certain fields hold animals and certain fields don't hold animals is the habitat and the cover near them.
Yep.
And that's, I wrote a Hunting 101 article back when I first started the website. You can find it in our Hunting 101 tab at soulseekersnation.com. And on that is I talk about the triangle. I've never really heard it be referred to as a triangle. I just came up with this myself. Animals need 3 things: food, water, shelter.
Yep.
And when you can find the triangle of where their food is, where their water is, and where their shelter is, and you can triangulate that, that's where you're going to find animals.
Yep.
Every time.
Yep. Just about every time.
And I think that's one of the things that newer hunters miss is like, oh man, here's a sweet ag field.
Yeah.
Yeah, here's a sweet ag field, but why am I not seeing anything in it? Why is it only birds, not 4-legged critters?
Yeah.
Well, how far away is their cover? There might be food there, but how far away is their cover and where are they getting their water at?
Yeah. If they don't feel comfortable, they're not going to be there. I mean, that's just like people, you know.
Uh-huh.
We were driving up and looking at these, farm fields and whatnot, and we were talking, and you brought it up too. You were like, man, so you're telling me that little lot of timber over there is where you'd find deer around that? And I'm like, heck yeah, absolutely. You know, they'll get down in them draws and get to where they can get out of the wind a little bit, and little travel corridors and whatnot. But yeah, absolutely.
So obviously this is whitetail woods, so it's easier to identify cover, right? Like, oh, it's open ground, but there's a patch of trees over there. There's the cover. Okay, so where's their water source? Their food is out in that field. They're going to be somewhere in that area.
Right.
Translating that to Western hunting, where almost everywhere is cover.
Yep.
Everywhere is cover. Water, depending on what region or state you're hunting, could be easily found or not easily found.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is you need to hunt the food source.
Yeah. Just like you've always said, you can find the food, you can find the bears.
Ah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
So you're hunting thick timber, but if you can find a meadow within the thick timber, there's going to be browse there for the animals.
Yeah, typically.
Yeah, typically. This is generally speaking.
Right.
And then when you're talking big mountainous terrain and a lot of topography changes, that's why you want to look for benches. Because if everywhere is cover, where's the most comfortable cover within the cover?
Yes.
Flat spots.
Yep.
Who wants to sleep on a hill, right? On a slope side, if you can sleep on something more flat.
Right.
Or something that gives you the view of the surrounding area that can allow you to smell what's from behind you and see what's in front of you.
Yeah, you can kind of tie that back to deer. Like, we've had a lot of conversation about, like, weather and would you hunt this day? And, hey, are you going to hunt this weekend or whatnot, you know? And I'm just like you are. I get a little more time off from work, but, limited time in the field and having to deal with work and everything else. But, yeah, you can tie that right back into weather, windy days, stirring the air up. Animals typically, from what I've seen, they don't want to move a whole lot when the wind's beating on them because they can't smell anything.
Right.
Same thing with it when it's storming or raining or stuff like that. You don't want to be out in the rain really. So, not saying that the animals won't be, but they don't really have a choice. But typically, they're going to be bunched up underneath a tree or doing something like that, or hunkered down until they can get a break in the weather, whether it be wind, rain, whatever like that. That just things that I've experienced,
Right, like why do deer bed down on the back side of a hill opposite of the wind?
Yep. Well, and they
Who wants to stand in the wind the entire day?
Exactly, and same thing with the sunlight. You know, a lot of these animals up in the mountains, you know, through my experience, and I'm by no means an expert, but they're going to be in the sun, getting warm. You know, if it's super cold and you're got up at an elevation and whatnot, I've found a lot of animals, you know, just hunkered down under a tree, kind of in the sun a little bit, you know, and then vice versa, when it's super hot, you'll catch them in the shade, you know. It's interesting, you know, the way these animals work, and you know, we get to go in the house at night. They live it every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really interesting. Well, let's tie it into a little bit more. So today is November 20th.
Mm-hmm.
So based off of the majority of the whitetail rut, a lot of hunters, or at least articles that you read online, hunters more or less call the rut on the 15th. And that's a general statement. I understand there's a lot of nuances to that, but generally it's like the first 2 weeks of November, I got to hunt the rut, and then after that, like, all right, now I have to shift my tactics of how I hunt these animals.
Yeah.
So down here in Texas, and obviously up here in Nebraska or these whitetail woods, I understand why people hunt out of stands now, because the animals, number one, they're plentiful. There's a lot of animals in these areas.
Correct.
Number two is there's only so many food sources that they're going to congregate in.
Yep.
And if you know where their bedding is, you're either going to hunt them in their bedding, hunt them over a food source, or you're going to hunt them in a transition from a food source back to the bed, or from their bed to water, or bed out to
correct.
Find the does, or
we spoke about that earlier before we started recording. You know how I was talking about a loop? There's going to be a loop.
Oh yeah.
You can find where them rubs are, and they're making a loop. And if you can set up in the loop where there's bedding, transition, food, if you can get in that sweet spot, man, you'll really get on them.
Yeah. Well, so how does this tie in? Like, new hunters are like, okay, well, you're telling me all this, but what does it look like? I'm not telling you exactly what the food source is. Maybe it's acorns. Maybe it's just the leaves of a tree.
Yeah.
But ultimately, this is how if you can't get boots on the ground to physically walk a terrain or an area that you're going to hunt, you got to hop on Onyx.
Have to.
And you got a digital scout.
Yeah.
Because from aerial imagery, you can spot sometimes water sources.
Yeah.
100% bedding areas and cover. And then you can also tell where food sources are.
Correct.
So if you can intercept and put your stand, or and this goes for big game hunting as well. Sit on a game trail. It might be boring, and you might not enjoy it, but if you want to see something and it's a heavy used trail, sit down and just wait.
Oh, absolutely.
An animal will pass by on that trail.
Yep. Man, I years ago when Dad and I really started hunting heavy, we were hunting on a piece of property that my granddad had leased since I was a young kid. And when we officially started hunting out there, we didn't have any corn feeders. No, it's a hawk.
Oh, a big old hawk.
Big old hawk.
That was a big one.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, so when we first started hunting this piece of property, we were just hunting the edges of ag fields and stuff like that, and we didn't have any corn feeders, and then progressively we got some corn feeders put up. But I can remember I went walking through the timber and was looking for a spot to put a corn feeder, and I didn't know what in the world I was doing, but I found an area where about 6 game trails converged into one.
Uh-huh.
And I put that corn feeder right smack dab in the middle of it, and holy cow.
Thing got hammered?
Man, never killed a real super special, crazy looking buck out of there, but man, we killed a lot of deer off that blind.
Huh.
because it was just what I amounted it to was a transition zone.
Yep.
We put the X on the spot, and they were transitioning from cover to feed, and one day they show up and there's feed right there in the middle of the timber, and so yeah, I mean, if you can lock it down and find out where they're at, and that's where the success comes from, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I want to take that and tell you a story about my very first time mule deer hunting.
Yeah, let's hear
and
it.
how that applies.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're talking about is it was in Eastern Washington, and it was the very first time deer hunting. Like, I had no real concept. I knew what deer tracks look like. I know what game trails look like. I understand that animals are going to be found in the heavy timber or they're going to be found on the edges of the timber.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with Tony and this other guy at the time, and they more or less just kind of walked off on their own, and I was like, okay, well. And I saw a game trail, and I saw some deer tracks on it, and I was like, well. Now, mind you, it's a 3-point minimum unit, so deer had to have a minimum of 3 points on one side.
Right.
Look, there's all these cows in this field, and there's no fence.
Yeah, there's a hot wire. You can't see it hardly, but there's a hot wire in there.
Yep.
It's just corn stubble, so they're just browsing on it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, so back to the story is I hopped on this game trail, and before I got into the timber, I checked the wind, and I checked the wind when I got in the timber. I was like, okay, thermals or wind is in my face, or at least cross breeze, so I'm good to follow this trail.
Yeah.
So I just slowly make my way in this trail. You know, it's an evening hunt, so it's got into the timber. It was darker. You know, couldn't see maybe more than 50 yards at the time. And I just slowly, step by step, started walking through. Now, granted, we weren't the only hunters up there. So there's other trucks and other people. But while others were walking further and deeper, I took a walk into a patch of timber.
Right.
And I was like, well, let's see what's down here. No more than 5 minutes on that game trail, I had a doe dead to rights.
Really?
Absolute dead to rights. And I had a gun up, crosshairs on it, and I was like, okay. So my instincts were right. Follow the tracks, get on a trail. It's not always going to 100% work out like that, but you have a higher probability.
Right. Yeah, if you're not where the deer are or where they want to be, and that's a easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, just like anything, you can kind of relate it back to our first bear hunt we went on together. We hiked, golly, all day long.
That was a long hike.
To be where the bears were, and they were not there.
Yeah, to where we thought they were going to be.
That's right. And so, his terrible as it was, we hiked out of there and went to another place to find them.
And we got on.
And we got on them. You know, it's if you're not seeing animals, you need to find animals.
Yeah.
And not just sit around and hope that you see one. You've got to get out there and find them.
Right.
They're there. You just got to find them.
Correct.
And it takes some sweat equity.
Boots on the ground, sweat equity, all that. And don't give up on yourself.
No.
Obviously, this is very 101 basic talk that we're talking, but this is a great reminder for all you experienced hunters that are listening to this podcast that when it comes time for you to mentor somebody, like, take them through these basics. If someone would have told me this, it took me 4 years to kill my first big game animal.
Really?
Yeah. From the time I bought my first hunting license to the time I notched my first tag was 4 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time for somebody to stick with something and not have any success.
100%. It's very hard to stay hooked. I've hunted Colorado for a lot of years, and not been successful. if I was new, I can see why people can throw their hands in there and go, you know what, this just isn't for me.
Right.
Easy done, you know.
Yeah.
But on the hindsight, I know what the reward can be like, and I got, you know, some people say it, I got that dog in me. You know, you got to get after it.
Preach, brother. Preach.
That's right. So, you know, I've never given up. I've kind of slowed down my hunts in Colorado, but definitely not giving up on it.
Yeah. Well, that was when we went to Idaho for bear this year.
Yeah,
We had a hard time getting on the bears.
we did.
And I don't know what it was, like why we weren't seeing them.
I don't know. It definitely wasn't a lack of effort or terrain.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know what it was. We got lucky on day one with me, and I mean, we hunted our tails off looking for a bear for you.
Yeah.
I mean, we really did. Through the rain. I mean, that rain, golly. If it wasn't for that Cryptek rain jacket and that rain gear we had,
Yep.
we would have been back at the cabin.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, there's no arguing that if we would have not had the rain gear, we would have ended the hunt.
Being miserable sucks.
Yeah.
There's a part of the mental toughness that hunting provides for you where you challenge yourself and your grit and your determination and being like, I'm gonna muscle through this.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm a big fan and proponent of working smarter, not harder.
Yeah. I'm with you on that.
And yeah, there's a lot to be said about being mentally tough, which we all need to be, and we all need to continually strive to challenge our mental toughness. But work smarter. Get the right tool for the job. Stop trying to do things with the wrong tools.
Yeah, that's how I felt with my first PRS match.
Ah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
I was like, all right, yeah, hey, this gun shoots, and it shoots darn good. It groups like no other, but it is definitely not the right tool for the job.
Right.
And I am struggling for success with the wrong tool. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And by gosh, if we would have not had them rain jackets, I don't know how long I could have lasted out there.
Oh, man. So true. Well, brother, is there anything else you want to cover on this episode?
Oh, who knows, man? I feel pretty good about it.
Hey, one question. I got one other topic I want to talk to you about.
Bring it up.
You know what are awesome?
What's
Knives.
that? Yeah, you can go down a rabbit hole with the knives.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm kind of a pocket knife guy. Always have been. It's just, what's your knife? Let's talk about it.
I got a Benchmade bug out. That's my pocket knife. I love it.
Do you have more than one?
Yes, but my favorite pocket knife that I carry is my Benchmade bug out.
Yeah.
I got it on me right here.
Is it sharp?
It should be. I got the sharpener in the back of the truck. I've been cutting up some stuff.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
Is it sharp? Is it the Sam standard?
it can use a little work, but hey, it's not dull.
Yeah. Like I said, I was cutting on it a lot this week, and
Yeah, I like the Benchmades. They're good knives. I actually don't even have one.
yeah.
I used to have one, but I gave it away to a friend. I'm a kind of guy that thinks every man needs to have a knife in his pocket. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's as a kid, I was just raised like that. You know, when I was a little kid, this is kind of funny. My dad, years ago, he's long quitting now, but way back then, my dad dipped skull.
Oh yeah.
He was a dipper, and he probably hasn't dipped in over 20 years or more. Actually, more than 20 years, more than 25 years. Anyways, my dad, I guess through buying dip at the store, somehow got a pocket knife, a skull pocket knife.
Oh really?
And it was green, and it was my very first pocket knife. And I remember Dad giving me that knife and saying, you know, a man should always have a knife in his pocket all the time. And I was just a kid. I had that pocket knife until I lost it. You know, I carried it so much that eventually I lost the son of a gun, unfortunately. But yeah, I think every guy should have a knife, and it's kind of a mandatory thing in my life.
Yeah.
What
do you carry on you?
Right now, I think I've got my otter. This is a pretty cool little knife. It's an otter messer. They're made in Germany, and I really like this knife because it's got a good shape to it, but it's very thin. Fits good in the pocket. I've had it for 3 or 4 years now, but one thing I've noticed that you always give me a hard time about is anytime we go to clean an animal, you're pulling out your Rob knife.
Oh, yeah. My niche custom knife.
Yeah, you're breaking out that sweet rig, and I'm like, all right, here we go. I break out my buck knife or my case or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
I break out the old pocket knife, and I go to hacking on that thing, and you're like, man, I just think it's hilarious that you clean game with a pocket knife.
Right.
I'm like, man, it's a knife, you know.
Your pocket knife blade is a little larger than most, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's not I don't know how big it is, 3.5, 4 inches, you know, but
yeah.
That's just what I've always ever done, and
it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's funny, but yeah, I like knives. I'm not like a knife collector, but I think everybody should have one on them all the time.
I think if I used my pocket knife to clean game, I would make sure it was sharp all the time.
Yeah, man. I if it doesn't take the hair off my arm, I will not carry it. And I've gotten to the point to where all my knives have gotten dulled up, and I go to leave the next day, and I'm like, oh crud, I don't have a sharp knife to carry today. It's a problem, you know. But yeah, they gotta be sharp, man. It's just one of them things. One of them man things, you know, for me at least.
Oh yeah.
Anyway,
I get it. I love that.
Hopefully, I get to put this inside of an animal this weekend and cut some meat off of it.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yep, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, hopefully a nice buck walks out. You know, I feel really blessed, and I want to just share this with all the listeners. Is up until moving to Texas, I only ever shot 2 bucks, and ironically, they're whitetails. I've never shot a mule deer buck.
Right.
Actually, I've never shot a mule deer, and I've never shot a blacktail buck.
Right.
The only bucks I've ever shot are whitetails. And the first one was a spike. Second one was a cool little 8-point basket buck, which at the time I was like, dude, this is awesome because it was my first ever branch antlered deer.
Right.
And it was symmetrical, which I love symmetry.
Yeah.
And then I come down to Texas this last year, and I'm able to fill a tag. And then this year, feeling like I get my understanding and bearings of whitetail woods a little bit more, and I arrow my first buck, and it's the biggest buck to date. And I mean, Lord willing, and he shines some blessings down upon us on this hunt, but it'd be really nice to keep leveling up and now shoot my biggest whitetail to date, or biggest buck to date here on this trip.
Johnny, this is what I have to say is you could potentially kill the biggest buck of your lifetime.
That'd be cool.
The potential is here.
Yeah.
We're going to the whitetail woods, man.
Whew.
And you never know what's going to come out in front of you. So, yes, I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Everything's just an opportunity.
That's right.
Just an opportunity. And regardless, it's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, we're going to be filming and releasing in Season 5 of Soul Seekers, which I can't believe I'm already on Season 5.
It's flying by.
So this hunt will be released in 2025 on Carbon TV, and you can catch up on old seasons and episodes now, currently streaming at carbontv.com or on the app on your phone, Roku, Apple TV, Fire Stick, all that, or at carbontv.com. You can also check out the podcast from Carbon TV as well. But guys, thanks for tuning in to this episode. Thanks for being a part of Soul Seekers Nation. If you liked it, the best thing you can do for this podcast is share it with your friends. Talk about it in your community. Remember that mentorship is conservation. If you want hunting to last for generations to come, you got to invest in the hearts and lives of other people. And you need to be able to articulate the why. Why do you do it? Why do we hunt? Why do you hunt? Why do you want to hunt? Why do people want to hunt? Why do people not want us to hunt? And understand the other side. Because I'm going to be doing a seminar this coming February in Salt Lake City at the Western Hunting and Conservation Expo, where I'm going to give a talk about how to talk about hunting. And we're going to do a little deep dive into human motivation and the psychology of humans. And one of the biggest things when it comes to anti-hunters is that they get very angry at hunters. And in human psychology, what I know is that anger covers hurt and or fear. So people, when they don't know how to express their emotions, they get angry, and that anger covers hurt or fear. Fear of their reality and what they know to be their perception of the world gets shook and changed, or potentially they were hurt by somebody at one point in their life, such as the movie Bambi, where they see a guy shooting one of the main characters of the movie and it breaks their heart, and then all of a sudden they have hurt in their heart from that, and then they are anti-hunting. So these are all things that we need to be able to articulate and share and talk about, and staying humble and coming to the table and being able to advocate for what we love. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in this episode. Be blessed. For Flatland Sam and I, live from the road of trails to whitetails. Be blessed, freedom on, and as always, stay soulful.
If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating, as it helps us share our mission of mentorship is conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group, as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.